Ladies and gentlemen, imagine this. You're strapped into a seat at 30,000 feet. The world a distant blur of white clouds and endless blue. When the woman who shattered your life leans over from her first-class throne and whispers just loud enough for the entire row to hear, "Look at you, Alex, still chasing shadows while the rest of us soar." Her laugh slices through the hum of the engines like a knife through silk. And in that moment, every scar she left on my soul rips open again. My name is Alex Harlan, and this isn't just a story of a bad flight. It's the tale of how one act of cruel mockery at the edge of the sky became the spark that saved 300 souls, including my own. But let's rewind, because to understand the storm that was brewing in that pressurized cabin, you need to know the man I was before she turned my world to ash. I grew up in a sleepy town outside Seattle, the kind where rain taps on your window like an old friend, and dreams feel just close enough to touch. From the time I was a boy, airplanes weren't machines to me. They were magic. I'd sit on the hill behind my house, watching jets carve silver trails across the gray skies, vowing that one day I'd be the one keeping those giants aloft. My dad, a mechanic with hands like weathered oak, taught me everything: how to listen to an engine's whisper, how to spot a flaw before it became a fracture. "Trust your gut, son," he'd say, wiping grease from his brow. "It's the only compass that never lies." Those words carried me through college on a scholarship, straight into the heart of aviation engineering at a top firm in Chicago. That's where I met her, Victoria Langford, with eyes like polished emeralds and a smile that promised forever. She was the rising star in operations, sharp as a turbine blade, and together we were unstoppable. Late nights in the lab, her head on my shoulder as we sketched designs for a revolutionary safety system, an AI-driven monitor that could predict mechanical failures before they happened. We called it Guardian. It was our baby, born from stolen hours and shared dreams of changing the skies forever. I proposed to her under the wing of a grounded 747, the stars above us brighter than any runway lights. She said yes, and in that embrace I thought I'd found my co-pilot for life. But dreams like flights can hit turbulence without warning. The company caught wind of Guardian's potential, and suddenly, boardrooms buzzed with our names. Victoria handled the pitches, her charm turning skeptics into believers, while I buried myself in the tech, perfecting every line of code. We were on the cusp, contracts looming, our future strapped in and ready for takeoff. Then one rainy Tuesday, everything stalled. Accusations flew like shrapnel: embezzlement, data theft, whispers of me selling secrets to competitors. I was blindsided, hauled into HR like a faulty part, my badge yanked away before I could even blink. Victoria stood by me at first, her hand in mine during the interrogation, tears in her eyes as she swore she'd fight for me. But as the days blurred into weeks, her visits dwindled, her texts grew cold. The last time I saw her, she was in a sleek pantsuit, hair pulled back like a warrior's banner, handing me a non-disclosure agreement. "Sign it, Alex," she said softly, her voice a stranger's. "For us." I signed, believing in that us like a lifeline. The next morning, the news broke. Victoria Langford promoted to VP, Guardian rebranded under her name, my contributions erased like contrails in the wind. She'd framed me, twisted evidence to climb over my broken back. The betrayal hit harder than any crash, my career in ruins, my heart a wreckage field. I moved back to Seattle, scraping by on freelance gigs, fixing lawnmowers, and dreaming of wings I'd never fly again. Years passed in quiet fury, a slow burn that kept me alive but never warm. Until that flight. Flight 417 from Chicago to London, a red-eye packed with 300 weary souls chasing new horizons. I was in economy, ticket bought on points I'd hoarded like regrets, heading to a job interview that felt like my last shot. She was up front, champagne flute in hand, surrounded by admirers in tailored suits. Our eyes met as boarding wrapped up, and time folded like a bad landing. Recognition flashed in her gaze, then delight, sharp and venomous. She excused herself from her circle, sauntered back through the curtain like she owned the aisle, and there it was, the mockery. "Alex Harlan," she purred, loud enough for the flight attendants to pause. "From blueprints to baggage claim. How the mighty have clipped their wings." Laughter rippled around us, passengers shifting uncomfortably, but her eyes gleamed with triumph. I felt the old rage coil in my chest, hot and familiar, but I swallowed it, forcing a nod. "Victoria? Still flying high?" She leaned closer, breath scented with victory. "Higher than you ever dreamed. Enjoy the view from down there." And just like that, she was gone, leaving me adrift in a sea of sympathetic glances. But as the plane taxied, engines roaring to life, a chill settled in my bones, not from her words, but from something deeper, a vibration in the fuselage that hummed wrong like a heartbeat skipping. At 30,000 feet, with her taunt echoing in my ears, I couldn't shake the feeling that this flight was about to test us all. Little did I know her betrayal wasn't buried in the past. It was wired into the very plane carrying us through the night. As the cabin lights dimmed and the seatbelt sign flickered off, I leaned back, staring at the overhead bin like it held answers instead of forgotten snacks. Victoria's words looped in my mind, each one a barb pulling at the threads of who I'd become. But to truly feel the weight of that encounter, you have to dive into the roots, the tangled vines of love and ambition that grew us together, only to strangle me in the end. It started innocently enough back in those Chicago days when the city lights twinkled like distant runway beacons. I was the wide-eyed engineer, fresh from the Pacific Northwest, my toolkit stuffed with optimism and slide rules. Victoria was a force. Transferred from New York with a resume that read like a bestseller. Harvard business, internships at majors, a knack for turning numbers into narratives. Our first meeting was in the break room, her spilling coffee on my notes, me laughing it off with a quip about turbulence in the lounge. From there, it snowballed. Shared lunches turning into strategy sessions, her insights sharpening my designs, my passion fueling her drive. We were opposites that clicked. Me, the tinkerer, lost in schematics. Her, the visionary, mapping paths to the stars. Nights blurred into mornings in my cramped apartment overlooking Lake Michigan, waves crashing below as we poured over Guardian. "This isn't just tech, Alex," she'd say, tracing the screen with her finger. "It's salvation. Lives will save before they even know they're in danger." I believed her, poured my soul into it, because in her eyes I saw a future where we built empires side by side. Our families met early on, a whirlwind weekend that sealed the fantasy. My folks, simple and steadfast. Dad with his calloused hands, Mom baking pies that tasted like home, adored her polish, her stories of boardroom battles. "She's got fire, son," Dad grunted approvingly over barbecue, while Mom pulled her aside for girl talk, emerging with teary hugs. Victoria's side was different. Distant parents in Connecticut, more interested in stock portfolios than potlucks, but she leaned into my warmth like a plant to the sun. "You're my anchor," she'd whisper after calls that left her drained, curling into me as if I could hold back the corporate storms. We dreamed big. Wedding on a beach at dawn, then a life split between labs and lectures, Guardian revolutionizing skies worldwide. But ambition has a shadow, and Victoria's grew long. As Guardian gained traction, the pressure mounted, deadlines like headwinds, executives circling like vultures. She changed subtly at first, longer hours, sharper edges, snapping at delays I'd shrug off. "We can't afford mistakes, Alex," she'd say, eyes distant. I chalked it up to stress, doubled down on my work, blind to the fracture lines forming. The betrayal didn't erupt in flames. It simmered, a slow leak no one noticed until the cabin lost pressure. It began with a whisper from a colleague, Tom Riley, over beers after a late shift. "Heard the suits are sniffing around Guardian. Watch your back. Victoria's been in closed doors with Caldwell. Caldwell, the CEO, a shark in pinstripes." I brushed it off, but unease settled like fog. Then came the audit. Anonymous tips claiming I'd inflated costs, funneled funds to ghost accounts. My logs, my emails, twisted just enough to paint me guilty. Victoria was my alibi, swearing affidavits that I'd been with her, but cracks showed. Timestamps off, alibis thin. In the HR room, fluorescent lights buzzing like accusations, she sat across from me, composed as marble. "I believe you, Alex," she said, but her hand trembled on the table. Lies have a texture, and I felt it then, cold, slippery. The firing was swift, escorted out with a box of my things, security treating me like a thief in my own life. Days later, alone in my apartment, I pieced it together. Altered files, forged signatures, her access codes woven through the fraud. She'd sold me out for the promotion, Guardian's glory hers alone. Rage came in waves, crashing with grief, nights staring at the ceiling, replaying her "I love yous" like faulty recordings. I confronted her once, pounding on her door in the rain, voice breaking. "Why, Vic? We were everything." She opened a crack, face pale, eyes hollow. "It was business, Alex. You were collateral." The door clicked shut and something in me shattered irreparably. I vanished after that, back to Seattle, rebuilding from scraps. Family rallied. Dad fixing up my old garage into a workshop, Mom's quiet strength a balm. But the skies called, a ghost I couldn't exorcise. Freelance tinkering kept the lights on, but Guardian haunted me, news clippings of its rollout under her name, accolades she'd accept with that same emerald smile. Relationships flickered and failed. Trust was a luxury I couldn't afford. Until Flight 417, fate's cruel joke strapping us together at 30,000 feet. As the plane leveled out, I caught glimpses of her through the galley curtain, laughing with a silver-haired exec, gesturing grandly about disruptive innovations. My stomach twisted, not just from the recycled air, but from the irony. Here I was, the forgotten architect while she reigned. A flight attendant passed, offering water with a sympathetic smile. Word of the aisle drama had spread. I declined, eyes drifting to the window where darkness pressed in. But beneath the calm, that wrong hum persisted, a subtle rattle in the panels like the plane was whispering secrets. I shifted, old instincts firing, Dad's voice in my ear, trust your gut. Was it imagination or something more? Victoria's mockery echoed, fueling a spark I thought long dead. Little did I know the real turbulence was just beginning, and the betrayal she'd buried was about to surface in ways that would test every soul on board. As sleep eluded me, I pulled out my notebook, sketching idle thoughts, but my mind raced ahead, to confrontations unspoken, to a reckoning that might just rewrite our endings. The first hints of trouble came not from the skies, but from the fragile egos trapped within them, whispers and glances that turned our shared history into a pressure cooker ready to blow. Up here, at cruising altitude, where the world shrinks to a patchwork below, there's nowhere to run from your past, and Victoria's presence was a shadow I couldn't outpace. It started small, that build of tension, a shared bathroom run-in mid-flight, her emerging from the lavatory with perfect makeup, me waiting awkwardly in the narrow corridor. Our eyes locked, and for a split second the old pull tugged, familiarity laced with poison. Still haunting the edges, Alex? She said, voice low but laced with that old superiority, brushing past me close enough for her perfume to stir ghosts. I gripped the wall, heart pounding, words caught like chaff in a filter. Some haunts are earned, Vic. She paused, half turning, lips curling in that way that once charmed me. Earned? You destroyed yourself. I just stepped aside. The galley door swung open then, a cart rattling through, breaking the spell, but the seed was planted, resentment sprouting like weeds in cracked tarmac. Back in my seat, I couldn't settle. The plane's hum felt off-kilter, a faint asymmetry in the engine note that nagged at my engineer's soul. I chalked it up to nerves, but unease coiled tighter, mirroring the knot in my gut from her barb. Around me, passengers dozed or scrolled, families with kids clutching stuffed animals, businessmen typing furiously, a young couple sharing earbuds, lost in their bubble. 300 lives, oblivious to the drama unfolding in steerage. As dinner service rolled out, bland chicken or pasta, the ritual that passes for comfort, I caught her again, striding the aisle like a queen inspecting her realm. She stopped at my row, tray in hand for show, leaning in with feigned casualness. How's the view from the nosebleeds? Fitting, really. Always were better at watching than leading. Her companions tittered from afar, but up close I saw the flicker. Uncertainty in her eyes, like she sensed the storm she'd stirred. Anger surged, hot and unbidden. Leading? You mean stealing? Guardian's flying because of me, Vic, not your shortcuts. Her smile faltered, just a hair, but she recovered with venom. Shortcuts? That's rich from the man who couldn't even save his own career. Enjoy your meal. It's probably the highlight of your trip. She sauntered off, leaving the air thick with unspoken accusations. The words hung, drawing stares from nearby seats. A mother shushing her teen, an older gent nodding sympathetically my way. Humiliation burned, but beneath it resolve hardened. This wasn't just personal anymore. It was a mirror to the life she'd stolen, and up here, with no escape hatch, I felt the first cracks in her armor. The night deepened, cabin lights low, casting long shadows that danced with the wings' flex. I paced the aisle when I could, restless, my mind replaying our history like a faulty black box. Remember the weekends we'd steal away to O'Hare's observation deck, watching takeoffs with childlike awe? We'll make this safer, she'd say, hand in mine. Now that safety felt illusory, the plane's subtle shudders amplifying my doubts. Was it the weather? A loose panel? Or something insidious born from boardroom greed? Victoria's promotion hadn't come cheap. Rumors I'd buried years ago resurfaced. Cost cutting on Guardian's rollout. Corners shaved to hit budgets. I shook it off, but sleep evaded. My seatmate, a chatty salesman named Mike, sensing my turmoil. Rough night, buddy. Trouble? I chuckled bitterly, spilling just enough. Old partner, fresh wounds. He clapped my shoulder. Hang in there. Karma's got a long runway. His words lingered as I stared at the safety card, its diagrams mocking my powerlessness. But power isn't always in badges or titles. Sometimes it's in the quiet knowledge that outlasts betrayal. Dawn crept in, a pink glow bleeding across the horizon, and with it, the first real jolt. Not emotional, but physical. The plane bucked, a sharp drop that yanked seatbelts taut, gasps rippling through the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, the captain's voice crackled, calm as polished steel. A bit of chop ahead. Please remain seated. But I knew better. That wasn't mere air pockets. It was rhythmic, tied to the engines, a harmonic resonance that spelled trouble in any engineer's tongue. My pulse quickened, Dad's lessons flooding back. Feel it before you fear it. Victoria emerged then, pale against her silk blouse, gripping the headrests as she made her way forward. Our eyes met across the divide, hers wide with something like fear, and for the first time I saw her not as villain but vulnerable. The drop hit again, harder, trays clattering, a child's cry piercing the din. Whispers turned to murmurs. What's happening? Are we okay? Tension thickened, a palpable fog, as the flight attendants soothed with practiced smiles. But I felt it building, layer by layer. The mockery's sting fueling a deeper conflict, the plane's whispers merging with my own unresolved fury. She disappeared behind the curtain, but the damage was done. The flight that started with her laugh now teetered on an edge, and I wondered if this was fate's way of forcing a collision. As the bumps eased, leaving us shaken but airborne, I leaned forward, breath steadying. The real storm wasn't outside, it was inside, brewing between us, ready to unleash. And in that fragile calm, with 300 heartbeats sinking to the engine's falter, I realized this wasn't coincidence. It was culmination. When the first real alarm pierced the cabin's hush, not the seatbelt chime, but a low, insistent beep from the cockpit that sent flight attendants scrambling. It was like the universe cracking open the vault of our buried truths. Victoria's betrayal, once a private wound, now bled into the open sky, exposing fractures that threatened us all. I was dozing fitfully when it happened, head lolled against the window, dreams tangled with blueprints and broken vows. The jolt yanked me awake, harsher than before, the plane shuddering as if shaking off invisible chains. Lights flickered, oxygen masks dangling like forgotten promises, and panic bloomed, a collective inhale held too long. Brace, brace! Voices called, but the captain's tone over the intercom was steady. Folks, we've got a technical issue. Stay calm, cruise on it. But calm was a luxury crumbling fast. Screams echoed from the rear, a businessman white-knuckling his armrest, the young couple clutching each other like lifelines. My seatmate Mike gripped my arm. This ain't good, man. What's happening? I unbuckled instinctively, old training kicking in, scanning the cabin for cues. The way the fuselage groaned, the acrid whiff of overheating circuits. It smelled like sabotage. Not weather, not wear, but deliberate decay. Heart slamming, I pushed toward the galley, dodging carts and elbows, drawn by a magnetic pull toward her shadow beyond the curtain. There she was, huddled with the lead attendant, face ashen, whispering urgently into a satellite phone. Our eyes locked through the gap, and in hers I saw it. Not just fear, but guilt, raw and unraveling. "Alex," she breathed, voice cracking as I stepped through, the curtain falling like a guillotine. The galley was chaos, trays scattered, a coffee pot shattered on the floor, but her presence cut through, a ghost made flesh. "What have you done?" I demanded, low enough not to alarm the cabin, but fierce enough to pin her. She recoiled, phone slipping from her fingers. "Done? I didn't..." But her eyes darted to the panel behind her, a service access I'd designed years ago for Guardian Diagnostics. My blood ran cold. That panel hid wiring for the safety overrides, the heart of what I'd built. With trembling hands, I flipped it open, against protocol, against sanity, and there it was. Tampered relays, corroded just enough to cascade failures, a deliberate sabotage masked as maintenance lapse. You cut corners, I whispered, horror dawning. For profits for your throne, you crippled guardian. Her face crumpled, the executive mask shattering into sobs. It was one decision, Alex, a memo to trim redundancies. The board pushed, costs were skyrocketing. I thought, it was fine. Tests passed. Tests she'd fudged, data she'd buried, the betrayal's full scope crashing over me like a downdraft. We'd built it to save lives, and she'd hollowed it for glory, leaving 300 innocents dangling from her ambition's thread. One decision? I hissed, the plane lurching again, sending us stumbling. This is a chain reaction. Engines sinking wrong. Hydraulics failing. We're coming apart because of you. Tears streamed down her cheeks, smudging mascara into black rivers. I didn't know. I swear the report said stable. Please, Alex, don't. But the words died as another alarm wailed, red lights pulsing like accusations. The emotional collapse hit me then, a tidal wave of grief and rage, for the man I'd been, the love we'd torched, the skies I'd trusted now turned treacherous by her hand. I grabbed her shoulders, not to hurt but to anchor us both. You mocked me hours ago, Vic, like I was nothing. But this is what your leadership bought. She sagged against the counter, broken whispers spilling. Regrets of lonely nights, the promotion's hollow shine, how she'd convinced herself it was necessary. I was scared of losing it all, of us fading. I pushed you away to protect something. Lies wrapped in half-truths, but the pain was real, mirroring my own shattered trust. Outside, the cabin devolved. Prayers murmured, hands clasped across aisles, a child's wail cutting through like a siren. The captain announced an emergency descent, voices over the PA cracking for the first time. Prepare for possible evacuation, remain calm. But calm was illusion. Fear was the oxygen now, thick and suffocating. Victoria clutched my arm, her emerald eyes pleading. Fix it, Alex, you're the only one who knows how. The irony burned. Me, the discarded piece holding the key to her survival. Betrayal's blade twisted deeper, carving out forgiveness before it could root. Yet amid the fury, a flicker. Dad's voice steady as ever. Save what you can, son. As the plane banked sharply, oxygen masks deploying in a cascade of yellow, I nodded grimly. Not for you. For them. The collapse was total. Her empire teetering, my heart in ruins, the flight a confessional at the brink. But in that raw unraveling, seeds of something fierce stirred. Revenge not in destruction, but in redemption. A chance to reclaim what she'd stolen, one wire at a time. In the dim glow of emergency lights, with the plane's fate hanging by threads thinner than spider silk, discovery gave way to a desperate calculus, not just survival, but the architecture of payback pieced together from the ashes of what she'd burned. Victoria's confession hung between us like smoke. The galley's confines a confessional booth at 20,000 feet and dropping. Her face, stripped of pretense, was a map of regrets, lines etched by choices that now circled back to bite. Tell me everything, I said, voice steady despite the chaos, kneeling by the open panel as the fuselage creaked in protest. She nodded, words tumbling out in a rush. The board's edict to slash Guardian's budget by 30%, her signature on the override memo that bypassed secondary censors. It was supposed to be minor, delay non-essentials. But the integration, it propagated. I buried the Sims that flagged it. Buried, like she'd buried me. Evidence shuffled into digital graves, reports sanitized for shareholders. My fingers traced the exposed wiring, mind racing through diagnostics I'd coded in fevered nights years ago. The flaw was elegant in its malice. A feedback loop amplifying vibrations, set to culminate in hydraulic seas within the hour. 300 lives teetering on her ambition's ledge. Rage simmered, but I channeled it, sketching a bypass on a napkin with a borrowed pen, reroute power through auxiliary lines, isolate the cascade. This could work, I muttered more to myself, but it'll take access to the avionics bay. Cockpit clearance. Her eyes widened, hope flickering amid the dread. The captain, he's ex-military, owes me a favor from a contract. I can get you in. A favor, traded like currency in her world of deals. But as she spoke, the plane shuddered violently, a warning that time was a thief faster than her betrayals. Planning ignited then, a cold fire in my veins. Not blind vengeance, but precise, a mirror to her sabotage. I'd save the plane, yes, but in doing so, expose her, unravel the web she'd spun from my stolen dreams. One condition, I said, meeting her gaze. When we land, you confess, full truth to the world. Guardians mine again, credits restored. She hesitated, lips parting in protest, but another drop silenced her. The cabin's cries a chorus demanding action. Deal, she whispered, broken but binding. With that pact sealed in crisis, we moved, her slipping to the cockpit with a fabricated passenger alert, me gathering tools from the maintenance kit under the guise of a loose panel fix. The flight attendants, faces taut with professional poise, eyed us warily but parted the aisle, their trust a fragile gift. Whispers followed. Who's he? Looks like trouble. But trouble was the woman beside me, her hand brushing mine in a ghost of old intimacy, now laced with necessity. In the cockpit, the air was electric, dials spinning, pilots hunched over checklists. The first officer's voice clipped. Loss of primary hydraulics. Backup engaging. Captain Ellis, grizzled and grave, turned at Victoria's knock, surprise etching his brow. Ms. Langford? This isn't, but she cut in, voice honed by boardrooms. He's your engineer. Ex-company knows Guardian inside out. The glitch is in the overrides. Ellis's eyes flicked to me, assessing, then nodded curtly. Make it quick. We're diverting to Shannon, but she's fighting us. The door sealed behind me, a vault of beeps and urgency, and I dove in, hands steady on the console, mind a whirlwind of code and memory. Victoria hovered at the threshold, useless but watchful, her presence a reminder of the revenge blueprint forming. Save them, shame her, reclaim my sky. Minutes stretched like taffy. I isolated the loop, sweat beating as warnings blared. System critical, 45 minutes to failure. Passengers' faces flashed in my mind. The family with the wide-eyed kid, Mike's easy grin, the couple's intertwined fingers. For them, not her. But oh, the satisfaction simmered. Her empire built on my bones, about to crack under scrutiny. A test ping, green. Relief washed, tentative as the vibrations eased, engines smoothing like a sigh. It's holding, I radioed back, voice cracking with exhaustion. Victoria's hand found my shoulder, a touch I shrugged off. Thank you, she murmured, but I saw the calculation. Survival first, confession later? No, my plan extended beyond the flight. I'd documented it all. Napkin sketches, her admissions whispered to my phone's recorder, timestamps tying back to her memos. When we landed, investigators would feast, her throne toppled by the very innovation she'd claimed. The descent began, smoother now, Ireland's green coast a beacon through the clouds. Tension lingered, a held breath across the cabin, but hope threaded through, attendants smiling genuinely, passengers murmuring thanks. Victoria retreated to her seat, shell-shocked, while I returned to mine, Mike's fist bump a small anchor. Hero stuff, man, you fixed it? I shrugged, the weight of retribution settling like ballast. Discovery had birthed not just survival, but strategy, a revenge poetic, exposing her without a drop of blood. Justice served at cruising speed. As the wheels kissed tarmac, applause erupted, a wave of relief crashing over us. But for me, the real landing was just beginning, a reckoning that would ground her lies forever. The climax unfolded not in thunderous crashes, but in the quiet fury of truths unleashed, a symphony of clicks and gasps that brought the plane down whole, while shattering the illusions Victoria had armored herself with for years. Touchdown at Shannon was a miracle wrapped in sweat and steel, tires screeching on wet runway, reverse thrust roaring like a lion tamed, the cabin erupting in cheers that drowned the lingering alarms. I sat frozen, hands clenched on armrests slick with tension, watching through the window as emergency vehicles swarmed, lights flashing like accusatory stars, fire crews in yellow suits staging for a disaster that never came. But it had come close. Oh so close, her betrayal's shadow nearly eclipsing 300 dawns. As we taxied to the gate, the captain's voice boomed gratitude. Folks, we've got a miracle worker in economy. Give it up for Alex Harlan. Applause swelled again, eyes turning my way. But my gaze sought hers, Victoria, pale as runway fog, unbuckling with trembling fingers, her first-class poise reduced to rubble. The doors hissed open, fresh air rushing in like absolution, and chaos reigned. Passengers spilling out, hugging ground crew, tears mixing with relieved laughter. I lingered, gathering my bag, the napkin blueprint clutched like a talisman until she approached, voice a whisper amid the din. Alex? We need to talk. Her eyes begged, but I saw the flicker, still scheming even now. "Not here," I said, nodding toward the terminal. Investigators waited, badges gleaming, notebooks poised like swords. We were herded into a cordoned lounge, blankets and coffee doled out, statements taken in hushed tones. Mike clapped my back. "You saved us, brother. Drinks on me in London." His grin anchored me as I wove through, Victoria trailing like a shadow shed too late. In a side room, away from the bustle, the execution began, not with shouts, but with evidence laid bare. I pulled out my phone, hitting play on the recording, her voice tinny but damning, confessing the overrides, the buried reports. Her face drained of color, sinking into a plastic chair as I synced it to my laptop, pulling up archived emails I'd subpoenaed in my darker days, her signatures on the cuts, projections fudged to Greenlight Guardian's flawed rollout. "This goes to the FAA, the board, every headline from here to Chicago," I said, voice even, "the revenge a scalpel, not a sledgehammer." She buried her face in hands, shoulders shaking. "I didn't mean... It was one choice, Alex. A cascade I couldn't stop. But choices are chains, and hers had linked to this near catastrophe, the plane's logs already whispering her complicity. The lead investigator, a sharp-eyed woman named Reyes, entered then, drawn by our seclusion. "Mr. Harlan? We've got prelims. The failure traces to a software anomaly in the safety suite." I handed her the drive, calm as a co-pilot's handover. "Guardian. It's mine, designed it years back." She rebranded it after framing me. Reyes's brow arched, glancing at Victoria, who met her gaze with crumbling defiance. "Is this true, Ms. Langford?" Silence stretched, taut as a guy wire, then cracked. "Yes," she choked, the word a dam breaking. Details poured, pressures from above, her fear of failure, the memo that sealed the flaw. Tears flowed freely now, not for show, but surrender, the mighty felled by their own weight. Outside, news vans gathered, cameras hungry for the miracle at 30,000 feet, but inside, the climax peaked, her calling the company line. Voice fracturing as she dictated her resignation, full admission scripted for the press. "Tell them..." The hero was the one I discarded. I watched. Heart a storm of vindication and ache. Revenge tasted bittersweet. Exposing her not to destroy but to demand justice. Restoring my name etched in the credits she'd erased. As authorities swarmed, piecing the puzzle, passengers trickled by, thanking me with handshakes, the child's drawing of a plane with a smiling pilot. "You're my hero," the mom said, hugging tight. Victoria stood apart, isolated in her unraveling, but in her glance my way, gratitude warred with sorrow. The board called back, outrage, recalls on Guardian flights, my reinstatement offered mid-chaos. "We need you, Harlan, fix this." I paused, the power hers once now flipped. On my terms. Hours blurred into debriefs, the lounge emptying as flights rerouted, but the core held, 300 lives grounded safe, her empire dismantled brick by lie. As dawn broke over Ireland's cliffs, I stepped out, air crisp with salt and second chances, the weight lifting like contrails in sun. Revenge executed, not in malice's fire, but truth's steady burn, had mended more than metal. It had healed the boy who dreamed under rainy skies, giving wings back to the man she'd clipped. In the quiet aftermath, as the last echoes of sirens faded into Ireland's misty morning, resolution settled like dew on fresh tarmac, a gentle easing after the storm, leaving space for scars to breathe and lessons to root. Victoria's fall was swift but not savage. By noon, headlines screamed, "Exec's cost-cut blunder nearly downs jet. Framed engineer saves the day." Her face splashed across screens, resignation letter a public mea culpa that stripped her bare. She boarded a private car back to Chicago alone, our goodbye a nod across the terminal. Words unnecessary, the chasm bridged by survival's grace. "I'm sorry, Alex," she said softly, eyes holding mine one last time. "For the skies I darkened." I nodded, no absolution given, but the fury ebbed, replaced by a weary peace. "Fly straight, Vic. You've got a long way to fall before you rise." And she was gone. A chapter closed, not with a slam, but a sigh. For the 300 souls of Flight 417, it was celebration, reunions in the arrivals hall. Tears of joy, my name passed like a talisman. He fixed it. The guy from the back. Mike slipped me his card. "Call anytime. Life debts don't expire." Even the captain sought me out, grizzled handshake firm. You gave us wings when they faltered, son. Aviation needs more like you. Offers poured in, consulting gigs, a full-time role at a rival firm, Guardian's patent rights restored with back royalties that silenced my scraping days. Back in Seattle, Dad's garage became a command center. Mom's pie's a staple as I rebuilt. Not just tech, but trust, one blueprint at a time. The moral isn't in the mockery or the malice. It's in the quiet truth that betrayal's sting loses its venom when you rise not to crush, but to carry others aloft. We all face headwinds, loves that lift then leave, dreams deferred by deceit. But it's the gut, that unerring compass, that guides you through. In the end, revenge isn't about pulling others down. It's lifting yourself high enough to light the way for those who follow. So next time turbulence rattles your world, listen close. There's magic in the mend, salvation in the save. And remember, even at 30,000 feet with the ground a whisper away, you've got wings if you trust the builder within. Thank you for joining this journey. Hit that like if it soared for you. Subscribe for more tales from the edge. Until next time, keep your hearts level and your skies clear.